The first session in today's schedule is the Meet the Researchers Innovation session, where we've got three speakers. We've got Abdul, Rehman, Jemily, Rime, and Justin Worsey. The day will run, these sessions will run with, we'll do 15 minutes of presentation, followed by a chance for about 5 minutes of Q&A from the floor. If we have time at the end of the session, we might bring people together, all the speakers together, to open the Q&A out between them. But we'll just see how the session runs. Okay. Without any further, sorry, we're waiting for one of the speakers has got lost. Abdul, are you there? Can you share your camera and video, and I'll bring you onto the stage? There you go, fantastic. First, we're going to have Abdul Rehman from the University of Bournemouth, a PhD student. Lovely. I'll leave you to it, and good luck, enjoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's quite an audience here. Okay, so as Tom introduced me, I am a PhD student at Bournemouth University. So today I'm going to talk about virtual production, and more like in terms of its potential for sustainability and what's going on in the market. All right, I will share my screen. All right, so the topic for my poster was opportunities and barriers for virtual production remote collaboration. So as it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's not about the technology of virtual production. It's about the opportunities and barriers that it can, we can use or, have a look on, so that we can, better use this technology or make improvements in it. All right. I myself am a technical student, but I also have a business background. So that's why, I also dabble in the marketing of virtual production as well as the production aspect of it. So, but this project was specifically focused on the industry to, understand that what the industry needs and like how we can create a collaboration network so that, we can link together everything, like what the suppliers are making or what the demand is, or we can, you recognize the demand and, ask the suppliers to adjust to the demand. So one of the big one of the big goal is the sustainability, right? But another thing that we have to focus is the supply chain links from China, because everything is being manufactured in China. For example, LED panels, LED processors, GPUs. So the networking and collaboration was a big part of this project. So, and whatever we will learn from the whole industry, we plan to publish it and let everyone know, like globally, so that we can make a change together. All right, so before I go further, like there's a small introduction of what virtual production looks like. It's just big LED walls. This is from the site of Mandalorian, and you just put a huge LED wall, and which is rendered by 3D game engine, and then there is a camera tracker on a camera, so that it can have an the aspect from a camera is such that it's always it always adjusts for the parallax in the 3D world on the LED wall. So, and this is what it looks like when the camera moves. The view on the LED wall, it has to be 3D. No, it's not 2D. It runs in a 3D engine. So, and you can see it adjusts itself to the camera's position. So one of the big advantages of doing virtual production is that everything can be moved before the shoot, before the actual shoot, so that everything can be planned beforehand. Everything can, and it saves from a lot of mistakes, it saves from a lot of repeats, and it saves a lot of cost, essentially. And this is one of the reasons that motivates others to adopt virtual production as opposed to the traditional filming or even green screen. So all right, so now as I already mentioned that this is about the industry, like what the industry has, industry opinions of virtual production. So as we all know that virtual production has a very strong foothold in the UK, because it's UK's film industry is kind of leading the virtual production along with the Hollywood, of course, but still it's not a global phenomena yet, even though it's very much common in UK and in the US now, and even also in Canada and Germany. But so there is a lag between nations here. For example, UK, China, and Korea. So there is a lag there because it's a pretty new technology, and the main thing that's causing that lag is the lack of networking. So for this research, what we did is like we asked the industry experts in the UK and also some of them in other countries, like what the others can do to help them, or not like others in the other countries, also in the UK, in the the policymakers, or at the fundraisers, or or just the academics, like what can we do to help them to expand globally and make their agenda known globally, the sustainable agenda. So and then we coded the interviews using the thematic coding, and then made up this chart that you can see here, like what they talked about. And in broad categories, these are the the 4 categories that they talked about. First thing is the motivation, like a motivation for people, because it's more like a sales pitch. Like everyone wants to tell you the benefits of virtual production, why everyone should adopt it, why it's very good, why it's very essentially it's very cool to do it. So, and most of them talk about their motivations of virtual productions, and then we have to ask them, like, what are the challenges, and then they give us some problems with virtual productions, and I will share in the following slides, like all of these categories and the specific problems. And because our research focus was on the collaboration aspect of it, so most of the things that we talked about were about the international collaboration, or if it can be done remotely and how it can be done remotely, and also on the training education, because it's a problem in the industry right now, because there is a skill gap there, and we are essentially academics, so they want us to know, like, this is how they want the new generation of the VFX students to learn. Okay, so this is the motivation, like why they choose virtual production over traditional filming. So one of the big thing is the cost saving, and also the tax relief. The tax relief is a big motivator, because if most of the production is done in the UK, then they get a 10% or probably 25% of the tax relief on the the whole film budget. And also the pre-visualization. So if you know exactly what's going to happen on the day of shoot, if you know that exactly everything is like a pre-planned whole orchestra of things, like on the day of shoot, then it saves from a lot of mistakes and repeats, and that essentially saves a lot of cost. Because in other words, you can think of it as that actors are very expensive, but the VFX technicians, you can say, are not that expensive as actors. So most of the cost moves towards the move towards the pre-visualization, and it's cheaper to do it than do it on the day of shoot or after the shoot. So excuse me. So and the challenge is that the mention is the biggest challenge is of course the skill gap, and I will be quick because only 5 minutes left. So and there's a camera tracking. There are like small technical problems, but not a big issue. They can be solved. And then, for example, LED light contamination is it's not a big issue, and it's still going R&D under R&D, and I think it can be solved with time. But even though in their opinion, they don't think that VP can replace on-location filming completely. So, and then they gave the training suggestions, a lot of them actually, but we summarize them as like what the the new students need to learn. And most of the main important point they were making is the coordination skill, because it's like a very complex workflow, the video production. So okay, so the why there's a need for global expansion. First thing is that for industry-wide sustainable changes, we need a international collaboration, because for example, we want the suppliers or manufacturers to know like what kind of changes we want. So that needs a global network. And if we have a collaboration system working, then we can also expand our talent pool. For example, there's a shortage of VFX labor in the UK, but we can access them remotely in other countries. And that's the access to a talent pool is a big motivator for global expansion. But there are also barriers to collaboration. One of the biggest one is a cultural difference. For example, not everyone speaks English, not everyone really understands what you want, and then there's a quality control uncertainties that are a big barrier. Like someone in the UK don't really trust someone somewhere in Asia to to produce some good quality content for them. And and if we use, for example, clouds from other countries, like for GPU processing, then there's a latency. There's a big talk on using the clouds for GPUs to save cost, but then there's a problem of latency there. So okay, I will summarize it. So in short, it looks like that without further expansion, or without doing anything about it to make changes globally, the UK's VP industry might stagnate. So we certainly need to do something about it. And so if we look for resources globally, like for example talent pools and media infrastructure, then we can not only help other nations to grow in this video production industry, but also benefit our local industry. All right. And okay. All right. I think I will just leave. So anyway, thank you all for listening. And if you have any question, I will just take questions now.
Hi, thank you for that, Abdul. That was great.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you can see it on whether you possibly can't see it on your feed, but in the Q&A, Michelle has already asked. So she says, this is a really interesting, how are you measuring the carbon footprint of the production? The screen must use a lot of light and power and game engine server power, etc.
All right, so we are not really measuring it right now, because there's of course the the power consumption measure for doing it, and it's pretty easy to measure like which LED produces less carbon footprint than the other one, just by the the power consumption and also the manufacturing process. But the whole process of manufacturing the LED panels, that's a different thing. We can't really do it here in the UK because the LEDs are being manufactured in the UK, and this is part of the plan that to collaborate with the manufacturers in China to make them adopt to our goals. Like we want this kind of LEDs. We want for example, yesterday someone was saying like if we want modular LEDs so that we don't have to throw them away when they get old. So right now we are not doing it. The only thing we are doing is measuring the power consumption, the total power consumption, and it's pretty high even on its own. But it's still, according to the industry expert, it's still cheaper than filming on on location in terms of costs. But most of that cost, according to them, is coming from the actors. For example, when there is an advertisement shoot in the UK, they have to hire English actors for it, but they would rather do it in Eastern Europe, in Romania or Estonia, and make them look like they are British people living in British homes, and create a whole stage there because the actors are cheaper there. So the main cost saving is happening there, like if you move to save the labor cost essentially. And there are some studies on the carbon emission and the total cost saving of the material production, but they are coming from the US market, not from the UK. But we plan to do it here as well, but it's not being done yet, as far as I know. So I can't see the question answer. If in my tab here it's blank.
No, there's if you click in this session and then Q&A, you can. At the moment, there was only Michelle's. But I have a question though about the applications for virtual production beyond film and TV. We're seeing it spread out in other fields, and I wanted to know, how you feel that this will affect the sort of global expansion of this, because obviously, one of the things about the UK and the US where a lot of this is happening is that we've got real strength in those. But I mean, do you see things? So the film industry in India, say with Bollywood, how are they taking it on, and what impact is that likely to have on other sectors there?
We didn't ask anyone from India like what's happening there, so I have no idea about that. But we did have interviews with Chinese a lot, like Chinese filmmakers, and I will tell you what's happening there. So they made a movie like Moon on the Man. So we asked them like what's the status of their budget, like how much was the cost saving, and according to them, essentially there's no difference because they don't have their expensive labor problem there in China. So they are just doing it just because it's cool and modern. So they are not doing it to save costs. So the big motivator for them is to keep up with the technology and to not lag behind and do it in a traditional way. So right now they are trying to do it, some of them, just to keep up with the pace of technology. So and I think it would be very much same with the Bollywood. So if they do try to do it, they would probably do it to just for the sake of technology, not for the sake of cost. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for that, Abdul. That was great. Really interesting. So thank you for your talk. We've now got Jemily Rime. She's a PhD student at the University of York, and she's going to be talking to us about the production of personalized and immersive audio using AI-driven tools for podcasts. So thank you, Abdul. If you'd like to leave the stage, and I'll bring on Jemily. Lovely. Hi, Jemily. I'll leave you to it.
Okay. Yep. Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Just let me share my screen. Hopefully you're able to see this. I'm going to assume that you are, but please do send a message on the chat if you can't. So my name is Jemily Rime, and today I'll be talking to you about my PhD research on immersive and personalized podcasting using AI-driven audio production tools. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of York in the Department of Music, and this PhD is sponsored by the BBC and XR Stories. So what are the motives for my research? First and foremost, the growing interest in podcasting. In the last 20 years, podcasts have gone from a fringe movement to a mainstream media. There's now something like 60 million episodes available on platforms like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, etc. And the conjunction of this growing interest in podcasting and the democratization of using artificial intelligence for production leads us to wonder what AI tools could be leveraged to facilitate podcast production or to create new forms of listener experience. Then, because podcasting is a relatively new media, there's been a lack of academic scrutiny into creative production processes. Bridging this gap would give a solid footing for further research and innovation to be based upon. Finally, we want to look into the question, what does next generation podcasting mean for creators? Because next generation podcasting is a term that is thrown around often in the podcasting spheres, but it almost means something different for every single person who uses it. So we want to understand what creators mean when they use this term and what they want to achieve so that we can help them make their visions come true. Basically, in other words, we're trying to answer the question, how can we support innovation in podcasting? In order to answer this question, we wanted to start from a current definition of podcast. But we found that most definitions that are out there rely on technical features like the necessity of an RSS feed or downloadability. And if that was true 20 years ago, nowadays over 80% of people actually stream their podcasts. And so RSS feeds are no longer necessary to share your idea and your content out there, especially if you're going through platforms like Spotify or SoundCloud. And downloadability is no longer a requirement. So by looking at what podcasts have been and what they became, we came up with this definition. A podcast is a piece of episodical, downloadable, or streamable, primarily spoken audio content distributed via the internet, playable anywhere, anytime, produced by anyone who so wishes. But the definition from 20 years ago is no longer valid. So will this definition no longer represent what podcasts morph into in the next decade? I think it's a fair question, and it's good to recognize that anything that we set out today is bound to grow and change into something different soon, especially when working with new media. So in order to support our research, we need a framework that enables innovation. And we came up with the 6 tension frameworks from conversation with podcast creators, professionals, engineers, etc. And it provides a flexible space for the boundaries of the medium to evolve in. We found that podcasts were defined by pairs of concepts in tension with one another, and they are as follows: automation and personalization, immersion and interactivity, current audience and possible demographic, technology and art, mainstream and independent productions, and universal and unique. To give a few examples, because I understand this is a lot, though it's like podcasting was tugged out by these different pairs in tension. And what we're trying to say is that balance should be kept so that the nature of podcasting is preserved. So, for instance, if we're trying to make a more accessible podcast, we could be allowing listeners to change the mix on their end, and that ends up in something that's more unique to each listener, but also something that's more universal because it would reach a larger audience. That if we think of AI-generated podcasts like Neutrino Watch or Podcast AI, which came out a few weeks ago, it's an automated process. This automated process can give a more personalized program, for instance, from audience suggestions. The key is that we should strive for balance within these pairs throughout innovation to preserve nature of podcasting. And that can help us frame our research probably better than a definition that we're bound to change anyways in the next few years. So in order to understand the current practices and habits of creators, we interviewed 16 independent and BBC podcast creators and asked them about their current work, particularly their workflows. And from their answer, we found that there was an archetypal podcast production workflow that was common to all creators, regardless of genre or type of production. We created a workflow diagram, which represents the most common path from one set of production to the next, including pre-production, production, and post-production. We have a color gradient that has been applied to these concepts, with green representing ideas that have been brought up by one participant, and red ideas that have been discussed by all 16. All this data comes from a thorough quantitative analysis where we looked at codes emerging from interviews and then grouped them by appropriate themes. So as you can see, this flow diagram takes you from the beginning of production. So pre-production, which includes the beginning of production, the conceptualization, organization, the research phase, going on to casting or workshopping and scripting, then onto the production phase, which includes sound design and recording, onto the post-production, and editing sits as this kind of middle ground for podcasts, particularly since editing is this massive part of a podcast creator's job. Often it was included in the production process rather than post-production, which could be the case in other media like TV and even broadcasts in general. And from this graph, one of the important conclusions that we've drawn is that podcast production is a particularly iterative process. So there are these loops, for instance, from workshopping to sound recording, recording to editing, these iterative loop that go on until the creators are satisfied with their work. So that's quite an interesting specificity of the podcast production workflow. Besides looking into what podcast creators were currently doing, we asked them to project themselves into the future and had conversations about different AI-driven technologies that could be integrated within podcasting tools. We focused on two aspects: personalization of content and personalization of interface. We asked creators how interested they were in using these particular technology, and they rated their interest on a 1 to 5 Likert scale after being presented short demonstration videos. We found that for interface personalization, concepts like touch tilt recognition, gesture recognition were often discarded due to accessibility concerns and the fact that most people consider podcasting as a hands-free medium. Technologies like voice and sound recognition were envisioned mostly as production tools rather than to enable new listener experiences. And metadata, there are around 50 definitions of metadata. I am using this term here to mean a collection of information related to listener habits and preferences and to the podcast they're listening to. So yes, metadata is particularly appreciated as a way to interact with podcasts that would be implicit and non-intrusive, which was quite important to most of the creators I spoke to. In terms of personalization of content, there was a widespread interest across the board, particularly non-linear narratives, kind of the choose-your-own-adventure type media received quite good scores on our Likert scale. And participants were often able to discuss concrete examples of potential uses at length. After these conversations, we wondered whether that was because this technology is something that people are already quite familiar with, or if it denotes an actual preference for this particular type of interactive podcasting. Other concepts like voice synthesis, sound synthesis, or reverse engineering music raised concerns over ethics and quality, which in turn allowed us to narrow down this wild field of research. So, because you can imagine, the list of technologies that you could apply to production tools is quite long, and we are trying to find the ones that could be feasibly applied to a production tool within the bounds of a 3.5-year PhD project, and that would find interest within the creators we are working with. So to develop this production tool that would enable next generation podcasting, we use participatory design. That you could have probably pictured that from what I was talking about earlier. If you aren't aware of the term, participatory design is a process that includes creators in all stages of design, allowing them to inform and influence the development of the tool in real time. So we're taking into account creators' opinion throughout this process to make sure that creators' voices are heard, that they grow familiar with the tool built as it is being developed, and that they have adequate expectations of its functionalities. It's important to involve them not only to build a robust software, but also so that they're able to create programs using this tool as part of this PhD. And that brings us to what's next. We're in the early phases of iterative development. We're carrying out conversations and workshops. And as we do so, we're beginning to understand what next generation podcasting means. And we're bringing light to the practices of creators so that future research in this field can be used. So that future research in this field can use this project as a basis for innovation. Thank you very much. Here are some references. And I will stop my screen sharing now. If you have any question, I'll be very happy to answer these. Also, sorry, I have an angry dog next to me, so if you heard any sounds, that was the dog.
Thank you for that, Jemily. That was really interesting. We haven't got any questions yet, but one of the things that I'm always intrigued by is unexpected findings. What was there anything? What most surprised you about from the research?
So actually, I think during this study where we looked at the current practices of podcast creators, I was expecting significant differences within production workflows for different genres. So talking to someone who's doing BBC documentary podcasts and someone who is an attic producer and has a lifestyle podcast about perfumes, I would have expected a very different workflow, right? But actually, the main... Sorry, we have a guest. So actually, the main difference is the tools that they're using. The software is a bit different, but the actual process is the same regardless of genre or who is producing these podcasts. So that's quite an interesting, and to me, something that was unexpected. Sorry.
Yes, you tend to think that people from different disciplines or different areas of interest will approach things in very different ways. But I guess a house still has to be built. Layer of brick. It needs a floor, of walls, roof, and they need to be all built in a particular sequence in order to be robust.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say it. Particularly, it's because podcast is kind of always portrayed as this kind of independent bastion of media, right? It's something that's very free. And now my dog is pushing my laptop, so if it's moving, sorry.
Just adds to the interest.
Yeah, it makes it more interactive. So yes, because it's such a feature of podcasts to be independent. So the fact that actually people do work the same way, and this independence is more in content shared rather than methods, was quite interesting to me.
Okay, right, yeah. Sorry, I was distracted by messages coming in. So I missed that last bit. Sorry, say that again. That last bit. That's okay.
Yep. Sorry.
Right. That's okay. If there's no more if there's no questions from the audience, I mean, Jemily is available all through the day if you look on the left-hand side of the navigation bar, you'll see people or the who's here within this session. So you can see Jemily and contact her if you do have any questions later on or want to talk further.
I will also put my email in the chat in case you have a
brilliant,
great urge to speak about podcasting to someone. I am probably the good person to go to.
Brilliant. Yes. Okay. And I've just noticed a top tip from Tara to use the closed caption button for live if you want to see a live transcript. Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Jemily, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And we'll introduce now Justin, Dr. Justin Worsey, to the stage. He's a postdoctoral researcher working with the My World research group at Bristol University, investigating techniques to improve the quality of video footage captured in low light conditions, including capturing ground truth data. Okay, so Justin's going to talk to us about that. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, I think you've done my presentation for me there, but fine. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to apologize. I have spent a lifetime in computer science, but Chrome did get to me today. So I'm doing this as best I can. So I do apologize for the slides not showing completely. Okay. So my name is Justin, and thanks for tuning in to see my poster presentation. The poster itself is more of a promotion of some of my group's activities, and it's not strictly a research poster, although it contains elements of that. As Tom said, my group is part of the My World project, which is funded by the UKRI Strength in Places Fund, in which we are very grateful. My World is a flagship for UK's creative sector and is part of a UK-wide exploration into devolved research and development funding. It is led by the University of Bristol, and the £30 million programme is made up of 13 partners from the West of England region's creative technology sector and world-leading academic institutions. My World has a mission to catalyse the region's creative economy, creating new jobs, driving inward investment, and supporting sustainable and inclusive business growth. My research group is on the academic side of all of this and is interested in using deep learning and other techniques to enhance video footage shot under low light conditions. Abdul's earlier presentation refers to cost savings, etc., of using virtual production, and so this is kind of at odds with his work in that we are looking at how to do this in natural environments, and in that kind of defense, I'm saying that there's always going to be a requirement to shoot in real world environments, and a great example of that would be footage in nature, so maybe watching some birds or something. So it's not all going to go virtual just yet. Okay. So the poster is kind of broken down into 4 sections. So the first thing is the problem of low light. So low light image sequences generally suffer from spatial temporal incoherent noise, flicker, and blurring of moving images. These artifacts significantly reduce visual quality, and in most cases, post-production is needed in order to generate acceptable quality output. Traditional enhancement techniques, such as histogram matching, wash out detail, flatten the appearance, and amplify noise. Most state-of-the-art enhancement methods based on machine learning require ground truth data, but this is not usually available for naturally captured low-length sequences. in order to address this, one of our objectives is to capture adequate ground truth data. And on that slide, you do see a couple of examples. Well, one example where the same scene with the two teddy bears is low light and also kind of daylight in that sense. Sorry, I skipped over here. So using a Cine drive, which is on the right-hand side there, with a Sony Alpha camera attached, we have been working on capturing complicated scenes under differing light conditions. We choose to fix the aperture and shutter speed whilst allowing the camera to choose the best ISO. The sequences also include non-linear motion whilst filming to provide challenging footage. So what we're meaning there is that we'll have some very slow moving stuff and then we'll accelerate it in order to create more blurring. I also have dogs, one of them is snoring. Each different light sequence is then frame aligned with a daylight equivalent sequence using edge detection and finding the minimal mean squared error across a series of randomly selected frames. Our research also extends to working without sufficient ground truth data using an on-paired learning method. We use CycleGAN as the base architecture with which we utilize a multi-scale patch-based framework which enables the capturing of both local and contextual features. Patches also allow for us to overcome excessive memory limitations associated with ultra-high-resolution content. Furthermore, we apply an adaptive temporal smoothing technique to remove flickering artifacts. The example in this poster shows a lizard. The target scene, you can just about see the lizard. Well, that's not true. The target scene being the ground truth is the kind of intensity daylight settings that we're trying to seek. We then have a low light scene in two cases, B and C, which is the low light and then at a particular ISO, which we're then trying to enhance. D, E, and F in this is D is the histogram matching that I talked about, which kind of washes out the scene. CycleGAN, which is a deep learning method without any modifications, and our model, which uses the temporal smoothing. And you can see on F that the results of the lizard are pretty clear and very good. One of our researchers recently released a data set for use with image denoising and enhancement. So it's not video based, it's more image based. This is a real world data set capturing 40,000 images over 25 different scenes. The data set was created to address shortcomings which most denoising algorithms, especially deep learning ones, suffer, e.g. the type of training data available. Due to none or limited amounts of ground truth data available, these algorithms are often evaluated using synthetic noise models such as addictive zero-mean Gaussian noise. The downside of this approach is that these simple models do not represent noise present in natural imagery. For evaluation of denoising algorithms, performance in poor light conditions, we need either representative models or real, literally real, noisy image paired with those that we can consider a ground truth. So that's my poster. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that, Justin. Really interesting. Yeah, and an area that I think all of us have I don't know, just gradually accepted how clever the technology is getting without really understanding, how this is happening and the complexity of what you're doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think the poster itself kind of contrasts two ideas. One is we are collecting data, ground truth data, in order to train against, and obviously we're stating that the lack of ground truth data makes it difficult. But at the other side, the kind of middle part of what we did is we are also researching areas where we don't need that ground truth data. So the cycle GAN, the temporal smoothing cycle GAN research is to kind of get over the idea of having ground truth. But as a rule, we prefer having ground truth. And yeah, I mean, it is one of those areas that these AI-based things are just black boxes. So I mean, they're very, very clever. If you wanted to kind of think about what's really happening, I mean, I'm not sure whether any of the audience understand what Cycle GAN is doing, and I mean, I obviously don't want to patronize anybody, but the easiest example is
well, just on that note, I mean, it's one of those early things from learning is that if you've got a question, the chances are other people in the class will have that same question. And I think there may be some people who are in the audience who understand, but I think if you can give a quick overview, that would be great, just for anybody who's unfamiliar with the area.
Yeah, no, I'd say I'm not necessarily the best. I mean, this is a Richard Feynman thing, isn't it? About I'm not necessarily the best explainer of it, but what I would say is that the easiest way to look at what Cycle GAN is doing is it is converting one image into another image, and good examples are the traditional example is a horse into a zebra and a zebra into a horse. In terms of lighting conditions, another way to look at it is that if you had an image of a snowy scene, so some trees or whatever with snow on them, Cycle GAN with the right amount of information of summer pictures is able to take that scene and convert it into a summer scene. So it's kind of, as a black box, it has a really good property that it can change from one domain to another. But what it does beg the question, and this is why I'm kind of talking about it more than maybe I should, is that with that lizard, if you think about what's happening, you've got this low light image of a lizard, which is arguably blurred. You definitely can't see the distinction of it. Cycle GAN is able to create this very shiny, reflective version of a lizard. And it begs the question, is it real? And what I'm kind of meaning is, instead of it being a lizard, if it was your face, and given that humans are really good at recognizing people, if your face was in a low light condition and then Cycle GAN came along, what would you look like? Because I doubt very much you'd actually look like what you resemble. So techniques that involve kind of pixel replacement from one domain to another are very good, and in the case of the lizard, it's really good, but it's not necessarily a practical way forward as a real solution for all things. And that's the kind of point I was trying to make. I may have gone way over the top on that.
No, that was good. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
Lovely. Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions from the floor, all that leaves is for me to thank Justin, but also to thank Jemily and Abdul for a great session, and to remind everybody that they'll be here and online all through the day. So just feel free to contact them through the People tab or directory. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Okay, all the best.